Good afternoon, Ryan.
Good afternoon.
How are you on this fine-filled, freezing, frigid day?
Not too bad. Just got back from light baseball practice, so feeling pretty good.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I guess we will get started, and as others join us, we can go on. I have a couple things I want to kind of announcement-wise, but I'll wait a little bit for the others to show up. Before we really get rolling, do you have any questions so far with this class?
No concerns so far.
Okay. Just wanted to give you an opportunity because you're usually pretty quiet in class and everything. Hey,
Hey,
Simba, I
Simba.
see just showed up there.
Hello, how you doing?
Greetings. I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go ahead and jump into the notes. And just in case I forget, before I let you go, make sure both of you make sure that I got these two announcements I want to make that I think will be beneficial for everyone. So I want to try to make sure more people hear them. All right. So this week, it's week 5, and let's get started. Let's start with job sharing. Okay, so Byers and Stanbury in your textbook, they define job sharing as when two or more employees perform the same. Give me a second here. One thing about Zoom on my laptop, it does not necessarily cooperate like I want it to. All right. Um, when two or more employees perform the work of a full-time position, each taking part of the total workload for that job. So basically, job sharing is just part-time employment. So in this case, if I were hiring for a job sharing position, I was hiring Ryan and Simba. You each would be responsible for half of what the full position would normally entail. Benefits of this particular approach include reduced stress, higher work quality, greater productivity, reduced absenteeism, and flexible work hours. So there are some benefits. But let's bear in mind that the employees, they are not getting paid full salary here. They're not getting the full wages. They're basically getting part-time pay. And usually part-time pay doesn't necessarily come with a compensation package. So you're not going to find insurance. You're not going to find stock options. You're not going to find 401k, nothing like that. Companies benefit by having the necessary talent pool without spending more on compensation and benefits. So if I have a company and I want to have a significant number of employees, I'm going to reduce the number of full positions I have. I'm going to go to this job sharing motif and basically employ part-time individuals. Another way companies save money on compensation and benefits is that they hire people in a from like a company like a security company or a tech firm, a tech company where the people they get their job through them, they get an hourly wage, but they don't get benefits and they're there on a contract. So they're only there for like 3, maybe 6 months, and then the job is done and they go about their business. So this is a way I've seen a lot of tech companies do it this way. And they also outsource their security to companies that specialize in that. But by doing this, they don't have to pay the benefits. Um, so is this just a way organizations can use to get out of paying for healthcare? You see, it looks like it might be. Or maybe it really is a legitimate thing that companies are doing to try to improve the quality of their work. But ultimately, you come down to one caveat. You save money in by not having to pay a full salary and not paying for benefits. So, some major issues with job sharing, not all industries, fields, or positions can sustain removing full time employees. There are certain professions you just cannot find this in. It's not going to work in certain things like law enforcement. Yeah, you may have part-time staff in a police department of a very small town, but you're not going to see it in full police departments in like large cities or large counties like Detroit or something like that. You're not going to see them doing a job sharing thing. Plus, an individual police officer's duties are very specific, and it's going to be difficult to kind of divide that up. You're not going to be able, you go do the patrol and this person will do the paperwork. It doesn't work like that. I actually spent some time in law enforcement and you do the paperwork for the work that you do. It's that simple. No one else does the paperwork. It's a legal thing. Moving on, there might be increased coordination problems. You might have scheduling conflicts arise here. Not all employees work well with others, and this model requires them to collaborate effectively. So, more than just part time employment, this is part time employment with intense collaboration. So, back to my original scenario here, I hire Ryan and Simba into this job sharing opportunity. They're getting paid part time hours. They're working part time hours. They don't have health benefits, but they get a project that I would normally assign to a single person. But here they get to share that project. Let's say they've got to work on a forecast, a sales forecast. So in this case, Ryan might be collecting the data and analyzing it, and Simba might be putting together the report and presenting it. Not all employees work, well, I already said that. That was nice. You have the two Mondays effect that can happen according to the authors when you use this particular approach. Instead of having one full-time employee experiencing the Monday blues, you now have at least two in the same exact position experiencing the Monday blues, and this can reduce productivity. So while there can be an increase in certain types of productivity using this approach, overall, now you've got double the force coming in on Mondays, and they got the blahs. I don't know if you felt like this, if you got to show up for a class on Monday morning or if you need to show up for a job on Monday morning. It's just blah. You've spent the weekend relaxing and now you got to go back to work. We used to have a commercial way back in the day for Dunkin' Donuts. And it was this middle-aged gentleman wearing the Dunkin' Donuts uniform. And he would get out of bed in his pajamas and he would be groggily going to the bathroom and brushing his teeth and time to make the donuts. Because donut shops, like bakeries, usually start really early in the morning so that they have fresh donuts and croissants and stuff like that available for people on their way to work at 6 in the morning. So they've got to get going like 2, 3 in the morning in order to have their shop prepared with the right pastries and everything. Some ethical issues with job sharing here. The textbook pointed out that hiring multiple part-time employees for the same position primarily benefits the company instead of considering the employees themselves. Once again, they're receiving a reduced amount of money. They do not receive any benefits. And basically, what's the advantage? If I really needed benefits and I needed a good stable job, taking this kind of position gets me a job, but not the benefits. It gets me the job, but not pay that I can live on. And as we discussed, I think it was last week about livable income, that's hard to get, especially in something like this. Part-time work is really hard to get a livable wage. You do better going into a security guard position and working a full 40-hour week. You still wouldn't have the benefits, but you'd at least have a full paycheck. So for this model to work, the correct job or jobs must be selected, since not all jobs within a company are conducive to this approach. The authors further point out the leadership must work with the newly created team to establish a written agreement between the employees to facilitate their collaboration and mutual determination to reach the goal of the position. When you get to the point of taking MGT 4071, MGT 4071, that's organizational behavior. It's a class that I've taught here at Cleary University. Organizational behavior, in there you learn that if you've got a team, you usually are wise to do a document, a charter, a team charter to delineate what each person's roles are, their responsibilities, how they should function and act and communicate. It's a formal way of establishing team behavior. And you would definitely need to use that in this particular situation. Now, from the leadership perspective, if I'm going to, instead of having a team of 5 people, I'm going to have a team of 5 job share positions. I now have 10 employees. And going and doing this team charter for each of these groups is going to be time consuming. So that may not be a smart thing. We might want to stick with the original format if time is precious to your leadership. Flex time. Byers and Stanberry explained that flex time allows employees to set their daily schedule. This, and there are a few typos here. I'm going to try to get them taken care of before I post them. But okay, this leads to the compressed work week, or actually, it was right. It led to the compressed work week at some organizations, which is a shorter work week or reducing hours during particular seasons of the year. So here, what you do is you say, instead of being Monday through Friday, we're going to be working, instead of 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, we're still going to work 40 hours, but we're going to work 10-hour days on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And this way, Mondays will be off. Okay, that's one way of doing flex time. Now, that's the company setting that up. If I come to you and I say, Simba, I've got a 40 hours a week I need you to work, but we're going to do this flex time. I need for you to go ahead and write down when you're available, what days and what hours, okay? And you should not be doing things like on Monday, I'll work 1 hour. No, that's not really good. You put down there on Monday, I'll work 5 hours, and Tuesday, I'll work 10, on Thursday, and you put down the times that you'd be working, and you actually come up with your own schedule. So here, the leadership must understand the goals for each position involved in flex time. If they do not consider the objectives for that position, then employees could file discrimination charges against them. There are certain jobs that mandate that the employee is more present than other times. Law enforcement's one, security's one, the military's one. You're not going to see flex time in those environments because you have a schedule you need to work. You can't really dictate the hours. Even as an adjunct professor, I'm not told what hour, I'm not asked what hours can you work. I'm told you have classes. I have classes that you can have between these time periods. Are you willing to accept that? And if I agree to that, then I am obligated to show up for those class periods. I don't have a say in it. But with flex time, I would get to pick my schedule. So you got to make sure that it's a type of position that you can do that with. A physician in a clinic, this would not work for a physician in a clinic. For a physician in a specialty type clinic, as opposed to an urgent care clinic, it might work. They might be able to say, yes, I'll do 2 office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'll see patients there because the doctor knows he's going to be in surgery on Wednesdays. And trust me, doctors like to go play golf and have their relaxation as well. And so they might do that on Fridays. So that is a field that it could work in depending on the position. Bias and flex time. The authors noted that research has found that many managers and leaders are biased against employees wanting to start later in the day. So later in the day, instead of coming in at 8 or 9 in the morning like a regular employee, you have flex time. You say, I want to come in at noon and I'll work the full 8 hours. I'll be there till, 9 o'clock at night because you have an hour for lunch and you got your break. So you got to figure that in there. Some people, as far as in management and leadership, they do not like this and they're biased against it. They actually think that you need to be working. If I'm working, you need to be working. Or if I give you a shift, you need to work that shift. You don't get to pick your time. So there are leaders that are really against this, and they may have very good reasons. They might think that they need to be present while you work in case a problem arises. And in some occupations, that would be a very good concern. In others, not so much. So it really depends, once again, on the position, the industry, and of course, the leaders. Now let's turn our attention to something that is relatively new, and it's the access economy. For you, being as young as you are, you probably never knew a world without the access economy. I remember time when the access economy, well, it wasn't called the access economy. Things like driving Uber or any of these things that you can just get a job and it's not really a job, but you work and you get paid, but you set your own hours. When I drove Uber, I decided what days I wanted to drive, if I felt up to it. I decided how long I was going to drive for. I decided everything. I was like an independent contractor, basically. So when we look at the access economy, so it's the gig type of work, we got to consider it does come from a historic place. There are jobs and professions that have been around forever, it seems like, that have been this sort of gig thing. Entertainers have oftentimes been a gig economy. When I was an entertainer, I could accept a show, I could decline a show, I could choose to do shows in this city or that city. I was my own manager, my own agent. So literally, it was a form of access economy. When I did my dissertation and I was looking at exotic dancers and gentlemen's clubs, you really find out they are all independent contractors. And in essence, they are actually a form of the gig economy as well. They fall under that classification. So let's keep this in mind as we go into this. Um, the authors define the access economy as being a resource circulation system in which customers participate on both sides of a transaction as both providers and obtainers of resources. The transaction is usually facilitated by a third party acting as a go-between. This model is also known as peer-to-peer or P2P. It is popular in the housing market through timeshare properties. So we have these different options. You want to rent a place in a city to stay. You can use these different services that are out there and you rent the house. I own the home. I put it on that market. You decide you want it. We set up an agreement and a price. You pay it and you get to come stay there. This isn't new. Being through the internet and being on apps, to me, is relatively new. We used to have they were called timeshares. And so there would be a condo in Florida and you would get your timeshare. You would pay a certain amount of money and you would have access to it to enjoy that condo for 2 weeks a year. So if you figure out there are 52 weeks in a year, you can get a lot of people, about 26 individuals, all paying on that property, and they each get their own 2 week window to stay there. And it's their home while they stay there. Now they can't like hang pictures on the wall, they can't tear down the wall and rebuild stuff because it's a timeshare. But we've had that for a long, long time. The authors provided some examples here. You have Airbnb, Relay Rides, Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit. These companies fall under the online platform economy. They are gig economies and definitely under access economy. They are definitely under that. Some issues facing the access economy. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that many access economy businesses face regulatory issues. These include tax concerns. I mean, who gets the tax bill? When you're driving Uber and taxes have to be collected, there's a money exchange. If money is exchanged for goods or services, tax has to be collected for the state and the federal government. So, how do you do this? Some jurisdictions have enacted legislation or ordinances based on health and safety issues. And ethically, local, state, and federal governments must protect both the rights of the businesses and the consumers. And when you got a business like Uber, that's the third party. Then you got the driver, that's the independent contractor. Then you have the customer. You have three parties, the rights, and you got to consider from a legal standpoint. I know in some places, I want to say it was probably about 15 years ago, maybe. I think it was New York City. They were passing ordinances against Uber and Lyft because the taxi cab unions got all upset that Uber and Lyft were coming in. They were charging the passengers less than the taxis were. They were basically taking the the taxi drivers' work from them. So the unions got together and they were able to get legislation passed, and Uber and Lyft, at least at the time period, I don't know about now, but they weren't able to operate in that city. The city was trying to protect the taxi drivers and their professions. More issues facing the access economy. Your textbook also noted that this business model has impacted how organizations obtain their startup funding. The traditional approach has been to make initial public offerings, IPOs, or secure private funding. So, in one way, you sell stock. Okay, that's what an IPO is. When you have your IPO, that's when you getting onto the stock market. Okay, so you're a publicly held company at that point. Because if you have gotten a business and you've got your investors, if you have less than 100 investors, you are privately held. You don't have to disclose your financial documents. You don't have to put out annual reports, quarterly reports. You are a privately held company. Hobby Lobby is a privately held company. Even though they're a huge conglomerate, a huge company, they're privately held. They have less than 100 shareholders. McDonald's is publicly traded. They have more than 100 investors or shareholders, and they have to release their annual 10K report. They have to release their financial dealings and all their documents so that the public can see how they're performing and people can decide if they want to invest in them or not. Plus, it allows for the investors to feel more secure because they have ready access to the information. If I invest in a private company, that company and we're going to be transferring information back and forth. I'm going to get their data, but if I'm a potential investor, it might be more difficult for me to see how that company has been performing. Your Byers and Stanbury claim that all businesses should be able to access capital in a perfect world of business ethics. But that's not the case. I don't know if you've noticed, we do not live in a perfect ethical business environment. We don't. There's another approach that I don't think I talked about in these notes, but I want to interject with. That is crowdsourcing, GoFundMe, and other things where you put out there and you say, we want to do this business, and 10,000 people decide they want to give into that. You're crowdsourcing to start your business. Or maybe you want to invent something. And so you come up with this idea and you present it and people invest into it and they basically pre-purchase an item that you want to invent and make. Now, in many cases, the item is never actually finally developed, and these people find themselves without their product and without their money. So you have to be careful about that. But these are ways of crowdsourcing for the initial startup money for a business. Some problems with crowdsourcing capital. Byers and Stanbury noted that crowdfunding options like GoFundMe, I guess I do talk about this, GoFundMe are not regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, which presents numerous legal and ethical issues in selling shares. The Biden administration allowed emerging growth companies, EGCs, to use crowdfunding through the Jobs Act, but this is sure to change as administrations come and go. I haven't looked into this, but I'm pretty confident this act, the Jobs Act, has been like repealed and replaced. I'm pretty sure about that. The gig economy. Now, we touched into the gig economy. Now, the gig economy, think of the gig economy as an umbrella, and that's the gig economy. Under the gig economy, you've got the other types within there. So you have Uber driving and you've got these other sort of access economy things with the gig economy as the great whole. That's why I'm able to bring in as examples entertainment individuals and different types of work, even freelancing as a consultant, bring that into there. They fall in there, even though they're not technically access economy, they're under the gig economy. So it falls under the same umbrella. Your textbook defined the gig economy as an environment in which individuals and businesses contract with independent workers for short-term assignments, engagement, or projects, offering few or no benefits beyond compensation. This includes freelance work, like I said. As you're going to see, I think on the next slide, or in a couple slides, it includes certain forms of entertainment as well. Now you have this slide showing employment relationships. You have the employees, you have full-time, a single employer, benefits, employment taxes are split between the employee and the employer. That's a standard model. You're going to see this. You got your full-time employee, they fall under this. Your non-employees, yes, your contractors, your freelancers, your gig workers, those, they basically work part-time. And I say that even though if I wanted to, I could drive 10 hours a day doing Uber, but I got to choose my hours. You have multiple employers or clients. And so in this case, you almost see the customers as the employer because even though my check came from Uber, or my deposit came from Uber, it literally was because Joe and Sarah and Tom all contracted with me to transport them physically to another location. They paid Uber, and Uber, acting as a third party intermediary, then took their share and then they paid me the remainder. Why did they take their share? Because I was using their platform. The platform is app based. People have it in their phone. They can access it. They can get me scheduled. The other option I had is to do it just by myself as a complete freelancer without a third party intermediary. But I would have to advertise, I would have to have a way for people to get in touch with me. Then I have to also facilitate the collection of the monies and stuff like that. So it's, in my opinion, it's easier to work with somebody like Uber or Lyft as a gig when you're in the gig economy. And if you're not wanting to drive, but you want to be part of the gig economy, you can look at something like Fiverr. Fiverr is an app service where, and I've done this before. I'm able to write corporate documents. I'm able to write policies. I'm able to develop procedures quite effectively. I've done that quite often. I'm pretty experienced at it. So I put my profile on Fiverr for a while, and somebody contracted with me to write up a policy. And I went ahead and I accepted it and I did it. And when I was partway done, I began to realize this wasn't a company I was working for. This wasn't a person starting a company. Because of the way the criteria for this project came to me and the way it was worded, I realized they were a college student paying me to write their project. Now, I had already agreed to do this, and I said, well, I'm just going to do it, take my money and go, but I'm not going to do this anymore like this. I don't believe in doing other people's homework. Because they lied when they came into this agreement. They said they wanted to do this for a business, for a nonprofit, actually, and they needed this policy written. Anyway, long story, as a freelancer, you're more prone to being taken advantage of, so you have to be careful. So non-employees, the contractors, freelancers, gig workers, they're part-time. You have multiple employers, no benefits, and employment taxes must be paid entirely by the employee. When I did my taxes every year, I had to take my statements I got from Uber. I had to pay the taxes. In a regular job, my company withholds my federal and state taxes and my FICA and my Social Security. They withhold that out of my pay. I can opt to have an increased amount withheld, and then that functions as like a bank account for me. So if I want to add an extra 10% being pulled out of my paycheck, they're pulling that out and it just goes to the federal government, basically like a loan. And then when I file my taxes and my refund, I get that money back. Freelance workers. There are estimated to be around 55 million freelance workers in America, which accounts for 33% of the workforce. This model provides greater flexibility for workers, but they do not receive health benefits and must pay their and their employer's share of the employment taxes. This can account up to 15.3% of their total earnings. So when you're self-employed, you pay a higher tax bracket. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's the way it goes. As a self-employed individual, I've always paid higher levels of taxes. Freelance workers and tax status. The textbook mentioned that a freelancer is classified by the Internal Revenue Service as being a de facto employee and must receive a W-2 form annually. When I drove for Uber, I got a W-2 form every year. And I benefited from it because I was working on finishing my dissertation at the time. And I started teaching as an adjunct for Cleary at that time. And so I would teach my classes, I would do my schoolwork, and then in the evenings or the afternoons, I'd be out driving, making more money. And it worked out good for me. Now, in my PhD dissertation, now remember, I was driving Uber when I was doing my dissertation too, but I found that the gig economy is one of the oldest professions on the planet. The gentlemen's club industry hires dancers. They use this model of independent contractor. And this goes back, oh my goodness, it goes all the way back to the belly dancers way back in Middle East, way back in the day. But this form of entertainment is really old and ancient, and it's really one of the things I can turn to and I can say it's probably one of the original gig economy jobs that are out there. Now, Byers and Stanberry noted that robotics provides companies with machines to do jobs historically held by people. This includes manufacturing, even surgery. Globally, robotics has taken approximately 8 million jobs, which accounts for 20% of the global workforce. Ultimately, wealthier nations like America and Germany will have around one-third of their workforce impacted by robotics. We are at a very interesting time in human development. I've seen this transition through my life. I'm 53. Now, robotic workers started coming in, I want to say in the 70s or 80s. I want to say probably the 80s. And they came into manufacturing and they're like, you really big into the car industry. And it displaced workers. People lost their jobs because of these machines. We could be upset about that, and we could sit here and say that it's wrong to bring in technology that takes people's jobs. Or we could look at it much like a competitive advantage. Competitive advantages come and they go. As new technology is developed and does replace workers, I think it is prudent for us as a species and as a society and individuals to find new and creative ways of gaining employment, legally, of course, so we can actually open up new frontiers. As the robotics and even AI do take more jobs away, we can actually find jobs more nuanced and specific that they can't do that are essential. Maybe we come up with new technology or new systems, new services. And I think it's just us as humans needing to be more creative. Now, robotics and the future. Um, this is going to impact approximately a quarter to half of the American workforce by 2030, according to your textbook. But what will be the future for these affected employees? The authors pointed out that around 20 million of these employees will go through retraining. So I've got a company, we're involved in manufacturing, we bring in robotic machines to do the job, and we have to let go of a half of our staff. The ethical thing to do, in my opinion, it's the right thing to do, is to retrain those workers. And if I have positions in the factory, it would be a good thing to just transition them into this new position through retraining. But if I don't, it would also be ethical to provide retraining so that they could learn a new skill or trade and be able to go get a job now that they've been displaced. I think that's the appropriate thing. Now, as a company, it would be really ethical if we did it. But I think it's going to fall on the government's shoulders to do this retraining ultimately. So, is it ethical to allow technology to displace such a great percentage of the global workforce? When we think about it, in a way, it doesn't seem right. But at the same time, it seems inevitable, like we cannot avoid it. We see science fiction shows and movies like Star Trek, and they don't have cooks. They have replicators. They don't have the same things that we do today. And I think the future of humanity, and this is me putting on my futurist hat, I think we're going to have to find new and more satisfying ways to earn an income. I think some options that have been put out there is that everybody is going to be basically receiving what they need to live and exist, and the work is going to be done by AI and the robots. And we need this income so that we can contribute to the economy. If we are not buying the goods and services that the robotic machines and the AI is designing and making, the companies that have these technologies will not succeed. Who's going to give them their profit? If we, as a citizen of an environment of a society that employs a high level of robots and AI in its workforce, are able to have the ability to live and survive provided for us and maybe some form of income provided, then we can contribute back into the economy and actually keep it going. Without that, it comes to the question of who buys the products these robots and AI are making. And ultimately, I don't think we have a very solid answer at this moment as to how this issue should and will be addressed. I think it's one of those things where we're going through life and this you would see on a bifurcation graph, which is basically you have an X and a Y axis, and you've got the line of time going, and suddenly there's a point of chaos and instability. Now it bifurcates into two possible paths, and they go for a while and they bifurcate again into two more possible paths. And so it branches out, and it's an incredible graph of looking at stability and chaos in a system or organization. But I think we're at that place where we're hitting the chaotic point. It's the beginning of the chaos, and we don't know what's going to be in the future. Now, the best thing to do is avoid the propensity that people as a species have to return to the past, to an old way of doing things, an old way of thinking. This keeps us from progressing, from evolving, from becoming better as a species. If we allow the moment of chaos to happen, we accept the uncertainty, we embrace that chaos, creativity actually can be born out of that chaos. The path of innovation goes the old way: stability, chaos, creativity. Then you've got the emergence of innovation happening. The key thing about the emergence is that we cannot plan for it. We cannot direct it. We cannot mold or shape it. Emergence literally happens on its own. Now, I see this in organizations, I see this in social dynamics, but I'm going to give you an example from biology right now, from zoology, actually. Let's say there is a population of birds on a coast of a country, let's say California. And these birds are small. They have brown plumage, so brown feathers. They've got short beaks because the bugs are easy to get to. The bugs are usually on top of the trees and leaves, and the birds can just grab them like that. They don't need to dig into it, nothing like that. They just grab the bug, eat it, and go. And they're flourishing. There's millions of these birds. A few of them wind up somehow on an island 1,000 miles away from the coast. Let's say they hopped on a ship. These birds, they got a ship, they got tickets to go on a ship. They took a trip and they got off and they said, it's nice here, we're going to stay. Of course, birds don't do that, but let's say that's how they got there. But the environment's completely different. Instead of there being trees and shrubs everywhere, it's all rocky. Instead of the bugs being right there on trees and stuff, the bugs are in the ground a little deeper, and they can't really get to them with their beaks. They got to work harder to get the bugs. And because it's brown and it's not this forest type environment, now the predators that want to eat the birds, they see them and they can catch them easier because they've got brown feathers. But we go back, we visit that island in about 3 years, because with animals, the emergence of things happens a lot quicker. Their generations are shorter. We go back and we see that same species of bird, but they look completely different. Now they have gray feathers with like little white specks on them. They're more camouflaged to their environment. Their beaks, instead of being short, are longer. They're able to get where the bugs are in the dirt. That's emergence. That's emergent properties. Okay. Now, we did not plan for this. The birds did not plan for it to happen. What happened is the birds that originally got there, they weren't able to thrive, but they were able to thrive enough to survive. They had some offspring. There were genetic defects. One of their children had orange speckles. Well, that wasn't what was needed for camouflage. That bird was eaten pretty quick. So that particular genetic anomaly was devoured up. It's gone. But one of their children or grandchildren had the gray feathers, and that worked. They lived longer. They were able to have more offspring. But there was another genetic defect, and some of them had white speckles on the gray feathers. They lived even longer and were able to reproduce even more. Along with that, the beak size began to change through genetic anomalies. That's emergence. Okay, now we can see this in human society. We can see it in our systems, in our organizations. Emergence, these are changes that happen without us planning. And we cannot experience these changes if we're clinging on to an old way of doing things or an old solution. That's called the status quo. And if you take MGT 4059, that's Discovering Leadership, the second half of the course goes into a more detail on this. Okay. Another course that I've had the pleasure and honor of teaching, and it's a good stuff. But anyway, I'm not here to give a promotion for that class. The emergence of these things has to just happen. We have to let the chaos happen. We have to feel the uncertainty and embrace it. Creativity occurs out of necessity. Emergence comes from that creativity, and we've got something new. And I think we're going to see the same thing about the workforce of the future. It's not something that we have to stress over in a bad way, but it is something we do need to cognitively think about. But we've got to be willing to allow for that chaos of the robots are taking over, AI's taking over. Instead of panicking and returning to an old solution, we stay put and we allow the uncertainty to lead to chaos, which leads to creativity, which leads to the emergence of something new where we can thrive and survive as a species in this new landscape. So, AI and robots, are they going to take human jobs? A number of them, yes. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Does that mean we're done for? Nope. It means we're going to become something better than we are. If you look at the show Star Trek, they have the replicators. They're not growing food. They're not necessarily preparing the food. They go to a machine and they request what they want and they get it. Did they pay for that food? No, in the show they do not. They are a post necessity society, or not post necessity, a post resource society. They don't have to pay for the resource because it's already provided. They have a function not to make the food or grow the food or carry the food, but their function is literally to explore what's out there. They're not getting paid to do it, but they do that because it fulfills them and they're at the core of their being existentially. And while they're doing this, they have access to the replicator. If you've ever watched the show The Orville, their replicators even make clothing. And I think that's an even better example. But they bring up something really important in The Orville. And that is, there was a person from another planet that came onto the ship and saw their replicator, how it functioned. And she said, this would solve all the problems for my people. And the crew member said it wouldn't work like that because they didn't grow into this. We grew into it through going through lack, through going through world wars, through going through all these problems and having to become ethically responsible enough to handle this technology and the freedom it provides. And they said, I'm going to show you something, and took them someplace where there had been a civilization that didn't have the ethics that allowed for this. What happened, somebody made the replicator, or they were given the replicator, and somebody rich decided they wanted to get richer, and they hoarded it, and they charged people to use it, and made people angry and envious because they saw the potential. But this person was so bent on greed and profit that all they could do was charge people and exclude people. So now you were either in the group that could pay for it and you were cool, or you were in the group that couldn't pay for it and you starved. And it led to a civilization's collapse in that particular show, that series. So I think that's rather true for society in general. We have to grow into these technologies. We have to grow into robotics and AI doing these jobs. And that's what we're doing. The problem about growing is it's painful. I know for me, when I was a child and I was growing into an adult, my bones would hurt. My joints would ache because of the growing pains. We're experiencing that as a culture, as a society, as a species. If we can endure that pain and make ethical decisions along the way, allowing ourselves to embrace the chaos of this uncertainty, we're going to have something so much better on the other side. Who knows? Maybe it will be like Star Trek or the Orville. Or maybe it'll be completely different, but it'll be so much better than we could even fantasize about now if we allow the uncertainty to unfold, leading to emergence. Now, after that huge tirade, let me go back into my notes. Um, okay, and we're here. So, robotics and the future. The authors cited the McKinsey report and claimed that the following positions would be most affected by this change: machine operators, factory workers. They've already seen a huge impact. And the more advanced that the robotics becomes, the more workers are going to be impacted. Also, food service employees. You see, and you probably already know this, and I found this fascinating. A few years back, McDonald's, I want to say it was in Seattle, Oregon, so the northwestern part of the United States, developed an automated approach to their restaurant. Now, it hasn't gone nationwide yet, but they developed the technology and the ability through robotics, and I would assume some form of AI. The customer walks in, they go to a kiosk, they put in their order, they pay, and they wait for their number to come up. Except there's no humans behind the counter. There's no humans in the kitchen. This was all automated and done with robotics and AI and stuff like that. They were able to replace the employees of that particular establishment with technology. And the food was made, the food was served, the food was consumed and purchased, profit was made. And I think it's fascinating because there's two camps here. One says humans need to have jobs, humans need to have employment, we need people behind the counter. The other one is why? Why can't humans pursue other interests? Be artists, writers, explorers, and allow the robots and the AI to provide what we need. But we've got to somehow bridge this gap between just surviving and thriving. How can we thrive? You see, human beings need to have challenges. Human beings need to have, I hate to say it, difficulty so that we can apply our mind, our effort, our motivation, and we really thrive in those environments. So we've got to find ways that we can use our creativity, our intellect to be able to do wonderful things as a species, thus allowing the AI and the robots to do the work. But we also have to have a way to bring everybody along with us. That means everybody needs to have access to these resources: food, healthcare, shelter, things like that, clean water, clean air. If we can provide this for everyone, then these machines can operate and we can find a new way to make money. Maybe instead of going and building something at work, we make art and we sell the art. But it's going to impact how we do business. It's going to impact how we do manufacturing. It's going to impact how our economy is structured. And that's going to take a painful experience of going through some things to get there. This change is also going to impact transportation jobs. Self-driving cars are going to be a thing. Now, there have been some reports that some self-driving cars have actually just been remote control cars, and there have been people across on the other part of the planet driving these cars around. That did come out in an expose. I didn't look deep into that, so I can't tell you if there's a lot of veracity or truth to that claim, but I have heard that claim. But either way we cut it, with AI and robotics, the direction we're headed is self-driving transportation. So that means no more Uber drivers, no more taxi drivers, no more me driving my vehicle. What are we going to do? I could sit here and worry and stress about it, or I can embrace this fact that, yes, we're uncertain, but something good is going to come from this. Now, let me just preface that, though. I believe honestly that if we embrace the chaos and uncertainty, creativity and innovation will happen, and something wonderful will emerge. But sometimes we have to make a few mistakes along the way, and mistakes are going to be made. And those are just points that we can learn. Those are lessons that we can learn. We're continuing with robotics in the future. Myers and Stanberry further discussed that the human interaction professions, such as any position requiring human-to-human interaction, would be the least affected. Jobs safe from this change include medical professionals, lawyers, teachers, Like I say, phew, woof, professors are safe. Social workers and even bartenders. I do have a caveat here I want to put out there. AI is advancing in a way that could jeopardize some of those positions as well. Remember, this book this that you're using, this textbook was 2018. So it's been 8 years and we've advanced with AI. And I honestly think that we are going to have to reconsider some things because AI is getting to a place where it's going to be able to replace some of these professions. If we start replacing some of these professions with AI, we've got to find a way to keep people engaged, motivated, employed, or at least have their sustenances taken care of, their needs provided for. We have to find a way to get past, become a post-consumer society. Right now, we are a consuming society. We work to get money, to spend the money on things that we need or want to consume. We are a very pro-consumer society. A post-consumption society is one where our necessities are available, they're provided for us. But we ourselves aren't just laying around doing nothing. We are being very active. We're doing things, like I said, art, writing, exploring, continuing the sciences. So there are many things that we as human beings can do with our minds that AI can't. But as AI is able to do more and robotics able to do more, and the two combined really working together, I think we're going to find new professions. We're going to find new ways of being engaged because what really is work? Work is a means to get the resources we need to get other resources we need that we cannot make ourselves. I get the resource of money so I can go buy food, so I can go buy transportation, so I can go. You see what I'm saying? We're going to have to find a way to fulfill this need. And people have a need for self-fulfillment. If you look at the, what was his name? Oh, the name is going off the top of my head. It just ran out of my head right now. The pyramid. Maslow's Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy says step one, we've got to have our physical needs and our safety taken care of. And the fifth level at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And believe it or not, many people have a hard time getting that self-actualization point. I think in order for us to become a post-consumption society, we're going to have levels one and two and maybe three met through the technology that's out there, through the system. And then the upper levels, something we can focus on. Maybe we as a species are going to become more intellectual, maybe more philosophical, more scientific. I don't know what it looks like, but it's going to be something that's going to be wonderful. The other option is that we eradicate the species off the planet and we cease to exist in the universe. Either we're going to be thriving and surviving, or we're going to end up killing ourselves with nuclear weapons or something in the future. We've got to find a balance between the two. It cannot be an either or. We've got to be more balanced, and we have to do this strategically and one step at a time in an ethical way. So the conclusion reached by Byers and Stanberry is that the American government, among others, will have to face a significant increase in the unemployment rate or develop legislation to combat this issue before it becomes significant. Now, this legislation could be to limit AI, limit robotics, thus keeping people in the workforce, or finding a way to, and I don't want to, this can come out very political, and I'm not meaning it that way, to move from a capitalistic form of society to a more social form of society where it's not negative, but it's like we're able to meet everyone's needs collectively. And now everybody gets to have the benefits of these technologies and is able to pursue other interests to stay motivated and engaged. When human beings lack the motivation and engagement that work provides, we can often turn to destructive things such as crime and stuff like that. And so we want to avoid that. We got to keep people occupied and motivated, and we got to get people feeling engaged and useful. And that's what's going to be. It's going to be something we're going to have to think about. And my generation, we're not going to solve the problem. We aren't. To be honest, your generation or the next generation after yours will be the one that will probably be solving the problem. We may start the solving of the problem, but we're not going to fully solve it. It's going to be too complex. Besides, the future belongs to you, and you need a voice at that table. My voice and the voice of people older than me and the generation before mine, our voices, we're at the table, but we've got to stop talking so much and we've got to allow your voice come to that table because the future belongs to you. AI, Myers and Stanberry mentioned that industries like banking, financial advising, and the sales of securities and managing of stock portfolios have already been affected by AI. Well, that was 8 years ago, and many more industries have been affected since the writing of this textbook. However, a holistic approach to implementing AI can help improve productivity and lower costs, unlocking more creative jobs and creating new growth opportunities. That's what I was talking about the emergence of new ways of keeping humans engaged and motivated. That's what I was talking about. KPMG, which is a company, has reports that close to 50% of the tasks currently carried out by humans could be replaced by AI in the future. Think about that. Half of the stuff that we do, that we call jobs, could be replaced by AI and robotics. Think about that. I bring the two together. AI operates as the brains, the robotics acts as the arms. Okay. You have to have them both involved here. If we can lose up to half of our jobs to this technology, we need to be proactively preparing for that. Like I said, preparing for and working towards, but allowing for something to emerge on its own. We got to remember those two things are essential. We've got to be focused in that direction. We've got to be trying to do our best, but allowing whatever's going to unfold to literally unfold. If we try to control and manipulate too much of it, the emergence of whatever the future would look like won't turn out quite right. So we've got to know when to keep our hands involved and when to back off a little. So being proactive and involved is essential, but knowing when to sit back and just say, we have to let things play out for a minute. That's essential. We got to know that. And that's balance. AI and ethics. Is AI ethical? Byers and Stanberry noted that clients and customers should be notified when AI is working with them instead of a human being. So what about when the staff member is using AI to help the customer or client? So if somebody comes to me and they're getting help, but I'm turning to AI and I'm getting information on my AI computer, and I'm like, okay, that's what, and I give them that information, I have to be careful. I need to disclose that this is not coming from me, that I'm actually using an AI agent and it's the information I'm getting from the AI agent. That would be ethical. The same thing like when you write a paper. If you use AI for anything in a paper, you disclose it through the transparency statement in your references. That is ethical. Otherwise, you're claiming that you came up with this information. Well, you didn't come up with the information. AI did in this case. Disclose it. And we also have to learn we shouldn't rely on AI for everything. Let's use these brains of ours, these human brains, these wonderful supercomputers we carry around. Our brain is more complex than any supercomputer out there, more amazing. Let's use it. And then let's use AI and this technology to supplement that. We can go to greater heights. If I have a rocket and I want to launch it into space, I have to have powerful engines behind it. Well, you also need some form of intelligence to guide this thing. In our example, we are that intelligence. We can guide AI. We can guide its use. We can guide robotics, its implementation. And if we do this, really, the stars are the limit. If we don't, we're basically going to destroy us or other people around us in the process. Ethics is going to have to tackle some of these issues here. Well, all of them. Remember that legislation follows ethics. There's always a delay, the whole Overton window moving thing. So as we develop a comprehensive set of business ethics and legislation, the legislation can begin to be developed to curb the negative effects of AI and robotics. Are there negative sides to AI and robotics? Absolutely. Job loss, loss of feeling necessary, loss of identity. That's an existential crisis. We've got to overcome this because you see, you're in college right now, and part of your identity comes through the college you're a part of, the people you hang around with. You see, I've learned through my studies that my identity is not just mine, but I have a little bit of identity from this group I belong to, a little bit of my identity from this group, a little bit here from my growing up and my parents, this part from this group, and it's all collected over time, and all of it together is the me that you know. So we need to do that. We have to allow for people to be able to keep that sense of self-worth, to grow, to thrive, not just survive. That is the end of this, which is a great segue into my two little announcements. First and foremost is AI. Okay, so this is the last of the grading that this week I'm grading papers, still using being lenient when it comes to disclosure of AI. However, that means next week when I start grading, so I'll be grading the work you're doing this week, I grade next week. I'm a week behind you, always am. Every professor is. I won't be giving that leniency. So if you use AI for anything in your assignments, in your discussions, the references need to have that transparency statement. Let me know how you're using AI. Because the goal is not that you get to use AI to do the homework. The goal is that you learn that AI is a tool. And like a tool, you use it to do part of the work, to make it better, to do this, to do that, but it doesn't do the entire thing for you. When I build something with my hands, I use tools. The screwdriver doesn't make what I'm working on. I do. I use that screwdriver for a task. Then I put it down and I use another tool, maybe a hammer. But I'm the intellect that's driving this. Don't turn to AI to write your assignments. That is dishonest. You write the assignment. Use AI like a tool, and then tell your professors how you used it. Every syllabus has a section where the professor tells you how they allow the use of AI in their course. So I have it in my syllabus. Every professor at Cleary has that. Follow that. Now, here's some advice. Some of you might be concerned that since we're using Pangram and stuff to detect for AI, because it is academic dishonest if you use it and don't disclose it, or if you rely on it to do the work for you, you might be worried that what if I do my work and it's 100% me doing the work? I did not use AI. I didn't use any predictive text, nothing like that. What happens if I get flagged as my work being AI generated? But it isn't. The best solution for you to do is to write things properly. Follow me. When I teach people how to write a paper, I teach them to use the meal plan: main idea, evidence, analysis, lead out. That's how you structure your paragraphs, okay? But I recommend that they do 3 drafts: a first draft, second draft, and a third draft. Your first draft of whatever you're working on should be all you. You shouldn't be turning to AI for anything at that point. You should be sitting down and working on it. Even if it is tore from the floor up, even if the grammar's wrong and things are misspelled, that rough draft is where these mistakes are welcome. You put the mistakes are supposed to be there. If English is not your first language, your English grammar is going to be out of place. Your punctuation is going to be off. The spelling is going to be off. That's the first draft. That's not what you're turning in, but keep it. Then you do the second draft. This is where you begin to polish it. You make it better. This you could actually look at using some AI for. Okay. Once again, not to rewrite the whole thing, but to give you ideas on how to fix it. And then the third draft, that's editing. I personally would use something like AI to do the final edit, to make sure everything is right, sentence structure, all that, but I'm not going to let it rewrite it for me. It will give me advice, and then I can go in and phrase it properly the way I want it to based on that advice. Then in my references, I would put the transparency statement. So if anybody says your work is AI generated, I can say, aha, I've got my drafts. Here's my first, second, and third draft. And this is where I used AI. Or if I didn't use AI, I can prove it with the first, second, and third draft. So really the best way you can prove your work is your own is by having all three drafts. So write your papers properly, use the three draft system, and retain them, keep them. Store them on a flash drive. Flash drives are small. It's not like you have to have all the papers physically there, but have them so that if you do come up being flagged for AI, you can go talk to the professor and show them your work. You can show them this was my first, second, third draft. This is how I put it together. These are the resources I used. I didn't use AI, and hopefully your drafts will actually indicate that. And if you do use AI, which is okay if you use it properly, you put the transparency statement in your references. And so when you're sitting down, you're explaining to your professor, say, I didn't use AI here, I used it here, I used it here, and you show right where it's done. You'll be able to do that because if you wrote the paper, you can explain to me how you wrote it. So I hope this clears some stuff up and gives you a way to, if you want to make sure that your stuff is 100% human written, how you can substantiate that and improve it. The other thing I want to bring up is extra credit. Normally in classes, I like to offer extra credit, and I don't believe I've offered any in this class yet. Let me double check that here on the other computer. Uh-huh, da, 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 da. Also, I do want to point out that Cleary says that your work has to be written in English. And so I guess that's supposed to be like even the first draft. And so if English is not your first language, do everything you can writing in English all the way through. And then you can always use the tools that are available to refine the structure of the language after that point. That is something that recently was brought to my attention by one of the senior faculty. Let me open up our class and go to the announcements. Okay, I don't see that I gave any extra credit yet. So I have extra credit for you. Since this is an ethics course, we are going to briefly pull something up here. And yes, this is something I did an AI prompt on, just so you know. I had most of this information in my head, but I just want it all in one place so that I could go through it kind of quickly. I'm not going to read it just directly to you, but yes, I did use AI for that. So I'm even being transparent. I normally don't. Like my slides, this is not AI. This is me. The best I do is I use Grammarly to correct things, and that's about it. You could choose, let's see, the topic is going to be ethics in business. It's going to be a paper, 2 pages long, APA 7 format. It's going to be with references and citations. And you have to use two sources, two scholarly sources, so like from the library. And I want you to, you can choose from, oh, this isn't working. Sorry, I wear bifocals, and so I have to put my head in funny positions to read anything. You can choose the banana controversy or the baby formula controversy or the chocolate bar controversy. Those are the three options. So the banana controversy, the national, was it national? The United Fruit Company, this is back a few decades, actually had their banana farms down in Central America. And they actually got the US government through the CIA to overthrow a couple democratically elected governments because there were policies that were being acted against the United Fruit Company that made it very unprofitable and more expensive. So they went to the United States government at that time period and basically had the government initiate coups and takeovers so that they could have the ability to do their business without restriction. The countries that were affected would have been, let's see, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Hey, come on. Columbia, I think. Yeah, I think it was Columbia. And so you can do a paper on that. And I want you to talk about the ethics. If it was ethically permissible for this company to instigate the government to go overthrow other governments. The other thing that you could write about is the baby formula scenario. And that was, and I'll get the company's name here in just a minute. Nestle. Nestle, we know them for chocolate, but they do a lot with baby formulas and stuff like that. There was a huge crisis, and I'm going by memory on this one here. Um, they got down into South America and they wanted to sell baby formula to new mothers. And so the new mother would come to the hospital. She would give birth to the child. They would give her baby formula, and the baby would eat and drink the formula there in the hospital. And when they went home, they would give her a little bit of formula. And after that, she had to buy the formula from Nestle. The problem is the countries they were doing this in are very, very poor, very impoverished. And so the people couldn't afford to buy the formula from Nestle. And because the new mother had started the baby on formula and had kept them on it for a few weeks, they were no longer able to nurse their children. Okay. And nursing a child is virtually free as long as the mother is able to eat nutritiously. The baby is able to consume nutritious milk that way. So they, in essence, Nestle made the mothers put their babies on the formula, and in the process, ruined the mother's ability to feed the child herself. And then the person wasn't able to buy the formula to feed the child. I want you to write about the ethics if a company should be doing things like that, if it's ethical. So research out either the banana issue with the United Fruit Company. And by the way, United Fruit Company is still around today. It's called Chiquita Banana. So if you go to the store and you buy a Chiquita Banana, that's that company that actually had governments overthrown and people killed so that they can make profit. Then you have the Nestle baby formula scandal that you can look up, do some research, and write a paper on, or you can do one on Nestle chocolate. Nestle chocolate comes from the cocoa bean, and there are a lot of reports around that. There are a lot of controversies surrounding that. You can pick and choose which one you want to write about. The one that comes to my head right away that I studied in grad school deals with using child labor in harvesting the cocoa beans. And it's basically forced labor, slavery. And it's horrific. So you identify which one you want, the banana controversy with the United Fruit Company, the Nestle baby formula scandal or controversy, and the Nestle cocoa bean or chocolate scandal. Do a little research, find out more about this, then use the tools you learned in this class about business ethics and write about how it was either unethical or how they should have done things different from an ethical point of view. All right. The paper is going to be worth 20 points. It is due at the end of week 15. That's week 15. So a week before we finish class, it is due. So week 15, the end of week 15, the paper's due, worth 20 points. All right. Are there any questions? And I'm going to put an announcement out about this. Are there any questions? All right. Well, I hope that everybody has a good, productive, and happy day. As we're getting close to the end of the semester, make sure you look and see if you are caught up on your homework. If not, you might want to contact me about working out a deal to get caught up. I would highly recommend that. Don't wait to the last minute because I'm not as likely to make deals in week 16 as I am right now in week 13. Make sure you keep up with your working canvas, and I'll see you Monday for lecture and class. You all have an excellent, wonderful, and a spectacular day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you're
You too.
welcome.
Thank you.